All right, thank you everybody for coming out. Great to be here back in Charleston, West Virginia. For those who may not have seen me here before, you've had plenty of opportunity, but maybe this is your first time coming to the conference. So anybody here the first time, Secure West Virginia? Wow, look at all those hands. All right, well, since a lot of you may not know who I am, my name is Matt Scheurer. I'm the InfoSec rock star. Thrilled to be back here at Charleston, West Virginia. My keynote topic today is called Don't Stop Believing on This Journey. With that, if you like the slides, want to grab a copy of the deck, slides.dfirmat.com. Feel free to go out there and download those. Let's kick it off. I'm going to get the boring disclaimer out of the way that says, yeah, I have a day job, but everything I'm talking about are my own thoughts and opinions, do not express or reflect the views or opinions of my employer. Now that that's out of the way, let's get to it. So some things about me. I work for a very big, well-known organization. They don't really let me disclose their name in public circles, but I would trust that everybody here has heard of it. I don't care if you flew in from somewhere else in the country, you would have heard of it. Vice President of Computer Security Incident Response. Last year, I was Assistant Vice President. I got promoted, so yay me. Thrilled to be here for that, and feel free to hit me up on social media, especially for you students and so forth. Learn to start networking, network professionally. Reach out to me on LinkedIn. If you don't have a profile built, get one started and connect with me. If you are on the X social media app, you can follow me up there at C3RKAH. And as for what I do primarily, I can do most everything. I'm very much a purple teamer at heart, but digital forensics and incident response is kind of my bread and butter. So with that, let's get to it. So I threw some numbers out here. I do a lot of public speaking, and this is my fourth keynote that I've given, and I was thrilled. This is the first one outside my home state of Ohio that I was asked to give, so I'm very honored to do it here because the number 5, the significance of that is this is my 5th year speaking at Secure West Virginia, and that's pretty awesome. If you're doing the math saying SecureWV 15, 5, that would be a third of them. Technically, it's more than that because that whole pandemic throws off numbers in the numerology I'm familiar with because one year it got canceled, the next year it came back in a virtual format, but they incremented the number nonetheless, so technically more than a third of them. 9 is 9 years of public speaking. It's been a great endeavor, and I have just kept doing it, and kept doing it. And then we get into 12. 12 is the number of states I have spoken in this country. That's 1/4 of what is considered the lower 48. I don't know where number 13 will be, but I might find out sooner or later when that happens. And 59, this is the 59th annual hacker or security conference I've spoken at. So I get around. I do volunteer work. I'm an official hacking is not a crime advocate. That's not to say that cybercrime isn't crime. It's really the pejorative term hacker and how it gets misused by media and other outlets that always affiliate with something bad. There's nothing wrong with hacking. There is big problems if you're using it to commit cybercrime. But if you have authorized access, if it's your own stuff, if it's something you have fair use rights to play around with and try to break, have at it. That's really the spirit of what hacking is. I'm on the advisory board for the Warren County Career Center where I live, the Information Technology and Cybersecurity program. I see a lot of issues with how we teach cybersecurity these days. We're trying to teach people how to run that have never learned how to walk or crawl before that. And so that's sort of my driver is to try to fix that. I'm on the advisory board to try to fix some of these things that are challenges that I've seen and continued knowledge and skill gaps. I very much have a teacher's heart. That's one of the big reasons I come out to these events and speak on a variety of security topics. And I always usually try to make sure you can take something away from what I've said and either apply it indirectly to what you're doing or just philosophically apply it to what you're trying to do and help, as far as your career, improve your life, those kind of things, or just outright technical skills. Here are these things I can actually do to make things happen in the environment that I am responsible for protecting. I'm on the technical mentor for WAMSA, which is the Women's Security Alliance. This is a great organization. They're always looking for mentors and mentees. So if that's something that speaks to you, do check out their website, wamsa.org, and get involved. So coaching and mentorship, I touched on this a little bit. I do this a lot. I do it not just by going out in public, but also where I work, and even people hit me up at events like this all the time. I'm more than happy to lend an ear, answer questions, offer advice, whatever it is. It very much is part of who I am and a large part of why I do what I do. Because after all, hackers are going to hack, and Mr. Micah K. Brown and I there are pictured in this. We actually took over the binary defense booth at a conference and ran the after-hours staffing of said booth. And then me and a gentleman by the name of Mr. Dave Kennedy. I think he was, back when this was called HackerCon, he was probably the first ever keynote here. And Dave and I have been good friends for a long time. If you're watching news and they're bringing on the expert to talk about a topic, it's probably Dave or a handful of other folks. But he's very well known in this community. The inspiration for this talk, really, I am sick and tired of, frankly, the cyber criminals winning. The threat actor groups that are compromising organizations. We read about it in the news all the time. We see news television broadcasts, we hear it on the radio, we hear it whatever streaming service we use. It happens entirely too many times, and we've been working at this for a very long time. In fact, this conference has been around for 15 years, and I think DEF CON just had, what was it, 33rd year. We've been at this for a long time, and we're a long way from perfect, trust me. So we continue to work on these things, and like I said, one of the reasons I come out here and I love teaching people and stuff is I really am trying to make a difference. I actually take it personal when the bad guys win, and it really frustrates me, and I want to start seeing us improve, seeing us get better, feel like we're making a dent, because who here wants yet another letter in your mail or whatever saying, oops, sorry, your information was compromised, but here's some credit monitoring service for a little bit of time. It's not really, it's not a windfall for you when you get those notifications. So, threats today. We are facing very skilled adversaries. And as I'm going to highlight here in a moment, these skilled adversaries work together very well. So well, in fact, that in many cases I feel like they're working together better than we are as tech defenders. And so their small, nimble groups can sometimes run circles around larger, big-scale enterprise information security departments because we're not moving nimbly enough. We're not working together enough. And I think it's something that we need to address in this space. I am passionate about it. I'm not just up here talking about it. I will talk about some of the things I've done, but it's not easy. If it was easy, we'd already be there, but these things are worth doing, and I believe in them, and I absolutely have my own blood, sweat, and tears in getting to where, the place I'm talking about where we're working collaboratively together. So today's threat actors, they're very sophisticated. They work together particularly well, and so we've got advanced persistent threats that have been around for a really long time. We have nation states behind those in many cases that are really coming after us in our infrastructure. And then we have different threat actor groups, organized crime, and then financially motivated actors. This is what is driving a lot of the serious and sophisticated attacks. There's other things too, like hacktivism and some of these other things, but really we're facing people that are very motivated to do things that will essentially mean that we have a very bad day. When you get data breaches, compromises, ransomware, all these things, these are usually the type of groups that are behind it. And it's not just usually this lone wolf person in a basement somewhere that's clacking away on a keyboard. It's teams of people and different groups, and like I said, they're actually pretty good at working together. And in fact, cybercrime as a service is something that a lot of these actor groups are doing. So they have very intricate networks, and they actually look a lot like legitimate businesses in some cases. And they're doing things like distributed denial of service attacks. So if you want to harm a business, you can essentially lease botnet to attack something to try to knock that offline. That also extends into like sort of ransom for DDoS, like, hey, you may have noticed that huge traffic spike. Guess what? That was us. And if you thought that was disruptive, if you don't pay us X amount of cryptocurrency, we're going to really come back the next day, and it's going to be much worse, much longer, so pay up or else. It's a real problem, and believe me, I've read the emails myself. I've been part of these investigations, in the trenches, fighting these things. Initial access brokers, sometimes actors will compromise an environment, and they'll just stop there. They get their foothold, they have their persistence. If you didn't know this, one of the first things an offensive security person is going to do, or a threat actor, once they get a foothold on the network, once they're able to breach or compromise something, even if it's a legitimate red teamer, pen tester, somebody doing offensive security within your environment, breaching attacks, their first objective is going to be, okay, we got a hold on this thing, now we need to maintain our foothold on it. So they'll start deploying persistence mechanisms so that they can maintain that foothold. Because the last thing you want to have happen is the system reboots, the user logs off, a patch happens, and then the system reboots, and all of a sudden they can't get back on. So they're going to make sure they have their access. And what initial access brokers will do is they'll get on a system, they'll establish their persistence, and then they'll just say, hey, who wants to buy access to this particular organization, whether it's a government, a hospital network, financial services institution, any kind of business. Just really the things that they try to sell access to is unlimited. And so they've already done the initial compromise, and they're just going to sell that off to the highest bidder on the dark web. And so then phishing as a service, if you want to fish somebody and maybe you aren't good at crafting fish kits, you can buy any number of those. Also, it's offered as a service. It's just like a lot of legitimate businesses offer legitimate services that you could buy to help you build upon your security posture and make things a little tighter and better security controls. Those are, just sort of the opposite, right? If phishing isn't something you're good at, we'll do it for you for the right price. And then ransomware as a service has most certainly happened. And so, the people that are asking to collect aren't maybe the ones that really started that off. It's just, hey, if you have somebody in mind and you want to ransom, reach out to us. We'll talk some money here and see what we can do for you. So that's what the actor groups are offering. And these have, by the way, they have support call centers. Like, they're maybe better than some of the services you might subscribe to yourself as far as helping people that are willing to pay them to do nefarious cyber activities, right? So these are sophisticated actors. They're very motivated to do things that'll make your life miserable. It stops just shy of a bad infomercial of breach and leak, cyber criminal strength. And so It's not quite that bad, but it's not far from it in all reality. So the cyber criminals are doing really well. Let's take a look at how we are doing as tech defenders today, just to contrast how good these other groups work together and provide services for one another, provide support for one another. They're responsive. They'll take questions. They'll help, walk people through things. They'll, take care of things for people. I kind of find that sometimes we're a little too often what I call the wheel of blame game right here. And, so when a breach happens and it hits the news cycle, everybody's asks, well, whose fault is this? And then that's when the finger pointing starts. Well, the board of directors ultimately approves the budgets, they oversee things, they help drive the direction of a business and so forth. That's whose fault it is. And the board of directors is like, look, we're not the professionals. We ask questions and we hear presentations and we get quarterly updates or monthly updates, whatever the cadence is. But the CISO, that's the person who's in charge of the security. That's literally, they are the Chief Information Security Officer. Now, the CISO ranks below the board of directors, so they can't come back and say, well, hey, you slashed my budget. It was approved for this, and then the mid-year you cut it down, and I had to do without all these goods and services, or I had to use alternate things that weren't quite as good. And so the CISO doesn't want the egg on their face, so, well, look, it was the security operations folks, our SOC analysts, they missed this alert, and this is why we got breached, because if they had caught this thing, if they'd responded to it properly, it'd be no problem. We would be, it would have been protected instead of had this bad, awful breach that just made us look really bad. The security operations folks will look at, the security engineering teams and, and say, well, look, they were supposed to build us this thing. The SIM is missing, it's overtaxed, and it's missing correlation searches. It's missing a lot of things in the environment. And so, we asked for this particular tooling. It's still being built out, or it wasn't built out correctly. It's their fault. If we had better tooling, we could have responded to this thing correctly, right? And so then security engineering, they're going to point to the systems folks and say, well, look, this were resource problems. We were under-provisioned with system resources, so the systems were overtaxed. We couldn't, our software couldn't respond to it. And also, these are the folks who manage DNS. I mean, a lot of problems you can almost universally blame on DNS. So, yeah, it's the system guy's fault. And the systems folks are like, well, look, it was the developers. They wrote this awful code that was vulnerable, and they deployed it out there in their sprint, and they didn't take the time to properly, engage security early on, and so they put this thing out there. It's very vulnerable, and it ultimately is the application that got the system breached, and they're the ones to blame. The system folks blame the developers. The developers are like, well, hey, look, audit gave us a clear checklist. They said we were compliant. Clearly that wasn't adequate, but you know what? We did what we were supposed to do. We met the baselines. We may not have exceeded the baselines, but we just barely met them by the skin of our teeth. And so, it must be those auditors' fault, right? And the auditors are like, look, we don't do any of this stuff. It was the user that fell for the phishing email that got the initial access into the environment. If they hadn't clicked on the phishing link, then this wouldn't have been a problem. And maybe while we're so busy blaming each other and having these infighting among teams, we just go out of business. We go bankrupt because while we're all busy finger pointing, we got this breach we can't really recover from, we're not working together well, we just can't sustain the business. I guess as a last resort, we just pull our get out of blame free card and just point fingers at the regulators and be like, it's these darn regulators, and they wanted this or that or whatever, because everybody loves to blame a straw person, right? And doesn't get much better than that, than to finger point to somebody outside of your organization. But really, if my mother were here with me right now today, what she would tell you is that if you point a finger at someone, there are going to be 3 fingers pointing back at you. And so I love my mom. I love slipping her avatar in some of these slide decks every now and again. But you know what? That's actually good motherly advice. As I like to think of it, global thermonuclear blame game is a strange game. The only winning move is not to play. Who knows what that comes from? Yeah, War Games. I love seeing the hands go up. Awesome. If you haven't seen the movie War Games, put it on your view list, your watch list. You won't regret it. It's a great film. Helps you understand. As old as it is, there's still parts of that are very relevant to today. So, one thing that I've done a lot is I've done a lot of volunteer work. I've always tried to rise to the task when asked for help with something. We have a meetup group in Cincinnati. It's part of SIMPA, the Cincinnati Networking Professionals Association. And SIMPA is a nonprofit group of volunteers. It's really about local technology professionals helping other local technology professionals. They meet monthly and people get together and discuss and share and everybody kind of helps everybody else out. It's very much a peer, sort of group among technology professionals because that means networking in the old computer networking sense, but rather than professional networking. But it kind of is that too. But I would tell people just forget about the networking part and think technology instead, and you have a pretty good handle on it. And they have multiple special interest groups. There is one focused specifically on security, the SIMPA Security SIG. That SIG group has been around for 20 years. I actually was the speaker for the 20th anniversary meeting on September 19th of this year. And gave a talk on cloud security. I had my good friend Daryl Highland, amazing skilled hacker. I think he's been here in the past, but it's probably been a while. And he had authored a tool a long time ago called Prada, which is used for printer hacking. He just released Prada 2, which is more of an audit focus now, but he took another look at multifunction printers. But I put of that 20-year history, I ran this group for 5 years of that history. I gave it everything I had every month. We meet the 3rd Thursday of every month. I had to transition a few years ago to another individual, and they are running that group to this day and still doing a really good job with it. Now, I understand Cincinnati is a little far from Charleston, West Virginia. It's a 3-hour drive for me to get here, and I'm a good bit northeast of Cincinnati proper. But you might have, like 304 Geeks, another group and other groups. I think I saw that it spun up a 2600 meetup recently here. Look for your local security groups and get out there and really interact with people. You would be surprised the things you can learn talking to one another. At the SIMPA Security SIG, wasn't just me up there talking. We had some other just absolute rock star folks in this, have been doing this for a long time. Amanda Berlin, the Info Sister, I don't know if it's still active, but she for a while had a black badge here because she would come participate every year. Philip Wiley, the hacker maker, who has authored a book called The Pen Tester Blueprint. He's a good friend of mine. I had him speak in one of our virtual meetings once. George Orchiles is a SANS instructor. He's also author of the C2 matrix for understanding what threat actor groups are using and the things they're going to try, specific actor groups. Super smart fella. And Daryl Highland I talked about earlier, and Mr. Dave Kennedy, who I talked about earlier, also came down from Cleveland all the way to Cincinnati to speak for our group 1 month. And that's just a short list because we've had tons and tons of other really good speakers, including Mr. Micah Brown back there. And yeah, it's one of the reasons I put so much effort into it is because of the outcomes. We had more former DerbyCon speakers, or anybody's heard of that conference or was actually at those and been there in the past. I was at all but 2 of them. I spoke at 2 of them. Great conference. I really miss it. Past B-Sides conference speakers, we had a lot of those speaking at the SIMPA Security SIG, multiple SANS instructors, and then just amazing security researchers that are maybe lesser known, but doing amazing security research work, and just gave us some really amazing presentations. And so the outcomes were the education and knowledge shares, just invaluable. The peer-to-peer networking, the peer-to-peer discussions, and chatting with folks, and sharing information, sharing knowledge, learning from one another was just amazing. Professional connections. The whole reason, trust me, I tried to break into information security for a long time. I mean, we're talking, a lot of years, and I heard no an awful lot along the way. Since I got the opportunity, I never looked back, but really the person who hired me, that gave me an opportunity, is the person who used to run the SIMPA Security SIG meetup group before I did. But he got to know me, know what I knew, and we had such great conversations. He knew I was super passionate about it. That was the person who finally gave me my first ever opportunity to work in information security, and I'm still grateful to him to this day for that. Job opportunities is a great place to find out about stuff. I know I made a lot of introductions because a lot of people would come to me and ask for advice. Sometimes people would come up to me and say, hey, we're trying to find somebody that's got these skill sets. We know you've got a big network of people. Do you know anybody in that network that's maybe actively looking that would be a great fit? And then, just friendships. So I see there's not just me from Cincinnati, but there's Micah and Tuan, and we're all really good friends. We were all part of this SIMPA Security SIG scene and all the other meetup groups that we had in the area, and these are lifelong friends. Micah is such a good friend that he actually swapped me a cryptid badge so I could have the Mothman badge, which I was really coveting, so thank you, Micah. That's what a true friend is right there, let me tell you. He really made my day. Thank you. Timeless funny stories and memories. Find us maybe after we're done speaking. We could tell you some stories. But yeah, just nonstop laughing. Like we were always doing dumb stuff and having the best time with it. Social engineering focus group. This was actually a work thing. So my employer, as I mentioned, is a big place. So there are two things at play here. One is we had these focus groups that we wanted to focus on specific attack surfaces. So things like networking, things like endpoints, things like social engineering, things like cloud, things like applications, things like supply chain attacks. But these weren't just groups for technical people. The idea is that we bring in also people that would have an interest in it that weren't necessarily technical. And this was a new concept of having these focus groups to sort of match up with this, what they call a fusion center concept. And it really fed in well to that. It really fit perfectly under that umbrella. And so the idea here is they asked me like, hey Matt, we know you've got some experience running groups. We got this idea. It's more of a high concept. We don't know exactly what these things are and how they work and how they should work. So we want you to run the first one on social engineering and figure out what these things are, what they could be, what they should be, figure out what works, what doesn't work, adapt as you go along, and then what you come up with is going to be the blueprint by which all these other ones are built on. And so I accepted the challenge, and it's interesting when you're bringing disparate groups of folks together for the first time, and as you might imagine, people are really excited about it. Like, oh, wow, this new thing, this new shiny thing that we're going to do together, this is going to be great. This is just like the cyber criminals are doing. They're working so well together. They're working so cohesively. They have each other's interests at heart. They're really doing a great job of collaborating and just bringing their resources together. And so we explained it to people, hey, we're spinning up this thing, and some people were invited, maybe didn't get a good explanation ahead of time what it was, so, everybody was super excited about it. We're building this new thing. Well, maybe not everybody was as excited about it as I was, because ran into one particular individual who was heading up another group, fairly high up there in the chain, and essentially told me, look, I don't think this is going to work, and I expect it to fail. So that's my starting point right here, right? It was, it's one of these funny things. Sometimes when you meet people that are, sort of curmudgeonly, they complain about things, and they're a little pessimistic, and they're cranky about it. Sometimes that's just who they are. Sometimes what you learn and when you find out about that person is the reason they're that way is because they are passionate about what they're doing. They actually care, and they've been let down too many times in the past. And so they don't want to get too hopeful because they're afraid of getting let down. And later on, if they see you're serious about it and you're putting in real effort, they'll come around. And so 2 years later, I remember having a conversation with the same individual saying, hey, I've termed out of this position that I've been running, which was, by the way, this was in addition to my regular day job and all the other stuff. And, at the end, we became good friends. I'm saying, hey, thanks for being open-minded enough to just give it a chance. And he came back with and said, look, you did a great job. You moved the needle here, and I think he meant this as a compliment. He said, you made it suck less. So, 2 years, but totally won this individual over because they saw that I was serious about it. They saw that I was really motivated to do it justice. And not that we got everything right, we had to adjust and so forth, but also, you have to be willing sometimes to adjust when things, and you have to be honest. You have to be intellectually honest, say this thing is or isn't working, and if it's not working, you have to be honest about it. Don't just blow smoke to management and say, oh, this is great, it's fine. Everybody hates each other, but it's fine. No, that's not okay. Really, you need to fix the problems. You have to admit you have the problems in order to actually fix them. And that's what we did. And so those were things that, did at work. I'm involved in a couple other things. These were things from the past, so I'm not going to discuss the other things, but getting along is actually really important because, again, the actors, they are working collaboratively together incredibly well. They are super tight. We need to get there as tech defenders. We really do. Sometimes people have great technical skills, maybe struggle with some social skills. One of the best things in my career was actually I had an employer push me through this emotional intelligence day-long class, and I went into it with what is this, like the new agey, touchy-feely nonsense. Doesn't feel like it's for me. I'd be the first to admit, I didn't have a good attitude about it, but again, thankfully I had an open enough mind that I listened, and by the end, I'm like, wow, I got more out of this than I ever imagined. This is probably the single biggest thing that changed my career around from essentially just being stuck in a dead-end position at an organization that was really not somewhere pleasant to work. The environment had really crumbled. So ironically, they're the ones who put me through this, and it's really helped me have an amazing career once I left. But honestly, this is good stuff. So if you do an internet search for emotional intelligence improvement, find some resources. You look at different ones. Find one that speaks to you. Go back and revisit it. This doesn't come naturally for me. This is something I've been working on for many, many years to finally get better at it and for it to pay some dividends. Soft skills go a much longer way, and they're much more needed in this community and in this career path than you ever might think. So some outcomes and wins of running this group. Relationships were formed. Believe me, when you run a group and you're bringing in non-technical folks and technical folks, so for example, I remember I got legal counsel in with the group I was running on social engineering because sometimes we have things happening on social media where there's a lot of impersonation for the purpose of committing financial fraud and those scamming people. And believe me, sometimes the big hosting companies or the big tech companies aren't always super quick at turnaround and getting stuff removed or taken down, and it has a little more oomph behind it if you have somebody with a legal background, a lawyer, saying, hey, get this stuff off your site. And having those relationships are vitally important because, I know, one, I know who to reach out to, and two, I have developed a friendship with this person. So when I'm asking for something, I'm much more likely to get it and much more likely to get a higher priority on that than if we had no relationship at all. And two, they know me. They know I'm very knowledgeable. I'm very driven to do the right things for the right reasons. They know that I want to make a difference. They know that I really have a vested interest in protecting employees and protecting customers and those sort of things. And so, having those rapports, yeah. And then also, because we had disparate groups, we shared a lot of knowledge. I spent a lot of time covering different technical topics, and for the non-technical people, they were able to ask questions, they were able to see. I always tried to speak to all audiences, but sometimes I'd go a little bit into the weeds, not too far, but far enough where they'd never seen some of the things I was showing them before. But vice versa, we also had people that had other areas of skill and expertise that knew how things worked, and they were able to explain processes and procedures to me that I would otherwise not have any institutional knowledge of. Greater cross-team engagement, this got so much better. Just bringing together groups of people and chatting on a weekly basis for 30 minutes. It was amazing how much more cohesive everybody got, and everybody started collaborating together when there was a need and it arose. It made a difference. Like, it legit made a difference. People that never even talked to each other, sometimes didn't even know each other before, know of each other. Now all of a sudden they're engaging with one another and tackling a problem together. And then trends were identified and discussed so we could say, hey, this looks like it could be a real problem because we're seeing more and more of this particular type of nefarious activity. And we also had some successful workshops and conferences. Brought in some amazing people to be part of that. One of the outcomes, if you come see my talk tomorrow, Lies, Telephony, and Hacking History, kind of an outcome of some of this stuff. Check it out. So some unexpected outcomes. So a corporate communication person said, hey, I really have been trying to figure out where I want to take my career because I feel like I'm kind of getting stale and stagnant, ready to move on from what I've been doing. I'm getting really into this cybersecurity stuff. What could I do in this space? And it's just, I was able to help her get kind of connected to different managers and have discussions and meetings with them to talk about those things. And actually, those things grew legs and it made things happen because of this group. And, person wouldn't even probably looked at the space had she not been part of the group. So that was just an awesome win. Some people think that offensive security is just this end-all, be-all amazing. I'm just going to sit and keyboard and clickety-clack, hack stuff all day. To be fair, that's a part of the job, but that's actually a small part of the job relative to everything else that offensive security folks do. I actually had a pen tester want to get back to his blue team roots, and he actually joined the fraud team as the technical point of contact and the technical resource for that group. So flip the pen tester to the blue side, all through that group. And then work was gracious enough. They gave me a nice award. This Platinum Shield Award thing it's like internally the Nobel Peace Prize, because at the platinum level, very few of these things are ever handed out. And I was just blessed that they recognized that I put in a lot of work to try to make things better. It wasn't to get this award. That was just, recognition for running the group. So, see how I'm doing on time here. All right, I got about 10 minutes. We'll do some Q&A here in a little bit. But so some parting words. I'm a firm believer of defense in depth. Beyond our standard practices, policies, controls, and technology, I firmly believe that people in depth, I'm going to say it again, people in depth, that's how we're going to move the needle forward. That's how we're going to win, because we need to work collaboratively together to get improvements in our security programs. We need to be just as supportive of one another as essentially the modern day actors that we talked about and the cybercrime as a service rings. We need to be just as tight as they are if we're going to be successful in this space going forward. So, oh yeah. One last thing. Regardless of your information security goals and objectives, if you want to get really good at information security, learn to think like an attacker. Now, to help a few of you out with that, I brought some black hats. So, we got a few minutes left. Happy to answer questions if anybody wants to ask any. Yes?
Is everything on the internet true?
According to John, well, okay, so the question is everything on the internet true? According to John Trellick's, everything on the internet is true. You might want to do your own research. That's all I'm going to say. Draw your own conclusions. Question over there.
How do you feel it's best to go about and not just bringing your security teams together as far as being security minded, but the rest of your coworkers like Dev, Scrum, stuff like that?
Okay, so the question is, how do you really get your non-security teams engaged with security? I'll be honest with you, that one's a little bit tricky. It's very tricky. In particular, the teams you mentioned are, by and large, involved in development. I'm actually working on a brand new talk called Rocking Security by Design that's going to address some of those issues, but I think extending the olive branch, the biggest thing I think that you can do is try to get together with meetings and talk to people collaboratively. Actually, we got invited. Next week, I'm going to be speaking at a very large, well-known grocery chain. And they have what are called security champions on their developer teams. And they're maybe making them go to it. I don't know. But either way, I'm going to do my best to try to win over that crowd. And that's not an easy, that's a tall task. But I think the biggest thing is if you can establish a relationship that isn't just specifically about work, take advantage of those opportunities when you see them. So me as a security person, if I only come to developer teams to say, look, we found these vulnerabilities in your program, or look what our pen test team found, you need to fix this stuff, and that's the only relationship I have with the developer team, what are they going to think the next time I come around? Oh no. Here comes the security guy again. What's he going to complain about this time? We've got a sprint we are trying to meet, and now he's throwing a wrench into what we're trying to do here. It's sort of like having that relationship built ahead of time so that when you need to talk to somebody, and again, having a relationship with folks, getting back to the emotional intelligence stuff, I think can go a long way. When you know somebody, you know a little bit about that person, they know a little bit about you, and it's not just 100% work and work-only stuff. So then when I'm walking up, they don't know, like, maybe we went to the same college, right? And so we love the college football team, and I come to them and like, hey, what do you think of that game? And we chat about the game a little bit. You know, they're not going to assume then when I come to them, they're like, oh, he's going to tell us about this big vulnerability, and now we're going to be all working late fixing these problems just so we can get back on track for what we were working on to begin with. So those are my approaches. I think some other folks have done some good things around gamification, particularly around October, which is, by and large considered Cybersecurity Awareness Month. There's actually some good online resources. I don't want to plug a particular organization or vendor, but hit me up. I can But if you spend some time doing internet searches for, they actually have some of these vendors put together kits on helping places for free to, help get the word out on security things. And this month especially is a good time to look for those resources. So hopefully a few ideas that one of those might pan out for you. Any other questions? Back there.
Will there be any more hacks?
Will there be any more hats? So I will apologize. I would have normally had double the number of hats. Unfortunately, I had a very miserable weekend and didn't get anything done I had planned on, which would included ordering more hats. So come back next year, please. I will try to do better. Love the question. Anything else?
Love the shoes, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Somebody loves the shoes. Thank you very much.